My name is Will Schmier, and welcome back to another episode of the Lovable Survivor podcast. This week, we are talking about 4 years of stroke recovery and the things that I've learned, and a little bit of a look back, things I would have done differently, things I've done that are positive, things that, just kind of all the things that I've gone through in the last 4 years. Looking back, a little bit of celebrating, although not too much. That's not my jam. Just really want to kind of do this episode, doing a little live streaming with my friend and producer Chris, amazing producer. Yeah, just kind of going through the whole thing. I thought it'd be good to kind of take the time at the end of the year here. This is the first and last live stream of this podcast for 2023 at least. And yeah, just kind of go through the thing, see if anybody shows up. Not really worried about it. Just want to record an episode of the podcast, go live, test it out, see how we do. So yeah, we'll start back to 4 years ago in December of 2019. It is not exactly 4 years. It'll be 4 years on the 23rd. But yeah, it's been an interesting ride, a long journey. Not for the faint of heart. Yeah, just a really well, it's a lot of things. It's emotional. It's been hard. There have been moments that have been surprising. There have been, of course, setbacks. 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or one step forward, 2 steps back, depending on the week. But yeah, just so many things to talk about, discuss. I mean, obviously, I can't fit it all into an hour podcast, but I'm going to do my best to kind of go through everything A to Z. And again, the things I really learned along the way, things that I can share with others. So yeah, we'll just get started. I guess back in 4 years ago, 2019, December 2019, had my stroke, which was surprising to say the least. Yeah, I just never thought I would be in that position, but I look back at photos and it's very clear why I was in that position. I was a mess. If you are on LinkedIn, which we are streaming to LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, probably some other places. I forgot already. But yeah, I had the stroke, was kind of a mess. I can't really give a good reason why. I mean, I was definitely heavily drinking for 22 years up to that point. A closeted alcoholic. Not mm, just just loved beer at the time, which is funny because Chris and I were just talking about it before we hopped on here. How I look at it now, I'm like, um, but yeah. So there was that, and there was just so many things. I was not in great shape. I was not taking care of myself. I joked with my wife last week that when she was pregnant with our 2 boys, I really was a great husband because I also gained weight, although I unfortunately did not lose it after they were born. So yeah, in hindsight, that would have been the smarter move. But here we are. There's a lot of things that led up to the stroke. Smoking obviously was not a good one. I thought I said this many times before on the podcast. I thought I came from good genetics. I thought I could smoke forever because my grandmother did till she was done. She was smoking on oxygen, so I thought I had good genetics. And I think we can all agree that if somebody in your life has had good luck in that regards when doing something bad, it's probably a good indicator that you may not have the same luck. And it is something it is not something to hang your hat on. It is not something to take lightly. Just know if somebody has had that luck, that's great. That's amazing for them, but you may not have the same experience. And that is true of pretty much everything. If you are a stroke survivor, if you know somebody who's had a stroke or a heart attack or any significant major life event, your story, your journey is going to be wildly different. I saw last week I had my friend Crispian on the podcast. If you listen back to episode 40, he's a heart attack survivor. We're former coworkers. He has a great story and he's made a great comeback as well. We had kind of a unique timing around our events. They were about a month apart. ironically working for the same company. And, he posted something today or recently where he was like, I haven't shared a lot of my journey because it's very unique to me. And I think I certainly respect that. And, he and I've had lots of conversations, but I think it's really important if you are able to and want to share your journey, and that can be different for different people. Sometimes there's haters, there's trolls, there's all those things online, so you got to protect yourself. But I think other survivors of these kinds of events need to hear different things that will work for different people. And so, again, not to get too far off track before we really dive in, but I just want to say that I think it is important to share things that work for you, because there might be somebody else out there who is going through things, or finding that something's working but they're not really sure because they haven't heard it from anybody else. And just, it never hurts to share, and it never hurts to be on the other end of that information. Although I do, one of the big takeaways he said, I hadn't thought of it, I don't think I've really discussed it before, but there's a lot of information to sift through online and all over the internet, whether it's heart.org or American Heart Association, stroke.org, which is a worldwide organization, lots of great medical things, right? But some of that may not work for certain people. If you're like me and you're 6'8" and kind of a bigger human being, what works for somebody 6'8" may not work for somebody 5'2", and vice versa. It's just wildly different. Take height, weight, age, so many factors into every individual, So that's what, again, it's up to you and how you do things. And Crispin has been sharing more things, but I think it's, it can be hard. It's just difficult. It certainly took me a while it took me a while after my stroke to even feel comfortable talking at all, let alone talking on camera, speaking on social media. Typing is still very difficult, but I think people out there are going through things and they need some encouragement. And some of the things I'll talk about later in this episode are things that I really looked down upon, things that I didn't take seriously, things that really wound up helping me, you know? So yeah, let's start at the beginning, I guess. We're 10 minutes into the podcast. So yeah, stroke December 2019, definitely unexpected. Didn't see it coming. I mean, looking back, yeah, there were some things. I mentioned this many times on the podcast, and for those that are new here, stroke at December 2019. I had turned 37. My family and I had just moved to Florida, back to Florida, hopefully for the last time. Getting settled into our new house, was really excited to kind of be back in Florida. Everything was great over that summer. Moved out of Virginia, moved my family all the way from Virginia to Florida. It's not terribly far, but it's far enough with a family of 5 to be difficult. But yeah, that fall, things started taking a turn, but I wasn't really recognizing the signals. I just thought I was sick. Obviously, in hindsight, that turns out I had high blood pressure. Probably had some things that should have been a little bit more noticeable to me, but I wasn't going to the doctors. I wasn't taking care of myself. I was doing all the bad things. I was still smoking, still drinking. It's weird. I quit smoking that year and got into vaping, which isn't particularly good either. However, I think, depends who you talk to. I'm certain it's better than smoking cigarettes. But, it's not good. So yeah, I was trying to make changes, but they hadn't really taken, they hadn't really stuck. Still drinking. It was definitely going down because I literally was getting tired everywhere I was walking. I mean, I was damn near 500 pounds at the time of the event. When I wound up going to the hospital before my stroke, when they admitted me, I went on one of those scales that are like, well, they're mostly for big people, but I mean, I was a quarter ton. That is a huge amount of weight. That is an enormous human being. So imagine 6'8" and 500 pounds. I mean, you probably can't even imagine that, because it's kind of, well, you definitely don't see a lot of them walking around. So yeah, had the stroke December 2019. Went into rehab, inpatient physical occupational speech rehab. Great facility here in Florida. I had a lot of physical limitations. I was paralyzed in the entire right side of my I was paralyzed on the entire right side of my body. No use of my hand early on. Couldn't walk. Just a big, giant mess. So there were definitely early challenges. There were a lot of uphill battles. I mean, it probably took me 2 weeks to wrap my head around what had even happened, and everything's kind of a blur. I've talked about it in nauseam, but you can listen back to some other episodes to really get the details. But yeah, once I got into inpatient rehab here in Jax, I knew things were pretty serious. I knew things were significant. I had kind of wrapped my head around, all right, well, there's no magic pill. This is going to be a lot of hard work. How much hard work? I had no idea. And that's true because every stroke is different. They'll say that till they stop talking when you're in these rehab facilities. And it's true. But, I had some pluses going for me. I was younger. At the time I was 37. And I just immediately fell into the mindset where I wasn't going to give up. I just kind of immediately went into how are we going to fix this mode, which is my personality. I think I went into kind of all the sports I played my whole life really took hold there. And I just got to work. It was not as easy as I hoped. If you've ever heard, God, I'm saying them a lot. If you've ever heard the 10,000 hour rule, well, I tried to apply that immediately. I was doing everything I could. And the reality is, we're not even at 10,000 hours 4 years in. But I've never really gotten away from that attitude. I go into things when I find things that work for me. It's been a lot of trial and error, which is why I do share things, because I feel like the trial and error is important. It's a great way to find out what works for you. And I think, hearing from other people and what's worked for them is a good way to kind of cut down some of that time. You don't have to research as much. You don't have to, it is a collaborative effort. You heard the phrase, again, ad nauseum, it takes a village. It's true here. I've had a great family support system the entire way and continue to have that in my life. Some of it's gone by the wayside, but that's okay. I'm really in a place where I can kind of take control and do what is best for me. And really, now when I need help, I don't need as much help, obviously 4 years out. But again, it's different for everybody. I saw somebody online who has been a stroke survivor for 9 years, and they are still making progress, but it is, surprisingly still slow for them, which is a little heartbreaking. But I also don't know them personally, so I have no idea their situation, their time constraints. Are they younger? Are they older? Do they work full time for somebody else? There's so many things that go into this that it can be really challenging. And it's not any less challenging as you get further out. It just gets different, and that may seem obvious, but a lot of things with stroke and stroke recovery, things that seem obvious, are only obvious once you kind of trip upon them or through a lot of trial and error. So it's an interesting experience. And yeah, I think for me, some of the big ones were quitting smoking, immediately quit drinking. Haven't had a drink ever since the stroke, almost 4 years ago. Again, it'll be 4 years on the 23rd. No cigarettes, no smoking, no vaping, no nothing. Really changed my diet to. And again, I've said this before, but my diet wasn't really hard to change, because if you take a beer and cigarettes and you replace it with healthy vegetables and proper nutrition and food and focus on that instead of drinking or smoking, for me, that was kind of an easy fix, because I was doing so many things wrong. Doing the right things was not really that difficult, and I think, again, for me, I'm pretty good at certain things. Like when I know that I made a big ass mistake, like having a stroke at 37, I know to take things seriously. I know how to. I knew how to do it before. I just didn't do it. Unfortunately for me, I wasn't able to quite save myself from the stroke. But again, something I've said over and over: if I can take sort of one for the team, and be the person that shines a light on stroke, or one of the many people that shine a light on stroke and the difficulties, and making changes before you get to that point. Hopefully you do. Hopefully you personally don't have to go through it, but it's you know it's not the ideal plan. It was never the plan, but hopefully I can help others. That's kind of the goal. It was the goal for this year, and it's definitely the goal continuing going forward, especially in 2024 with Survivor Science and this podcast, The Lovable Survivor, and sort of building out community and building out resources on the Survivor Science website, which is under construction, about to release. Just trying to get some more articles in the pipeline before that all goes live. And that'll be a work in progress, and we'll see how that goes. And we'll continue to work with other survivors of different backgrounds and different stories. Got an episode coming out later this week on the podcast with my friend Margot. She's actually a stroke survivor. She'll be the first guest that's a stroke survivor. So look for that later this week, probably Thursday on your favorite podcasting app. But yeah, lots of challenges, lots of, again, it was the diet, there's a lot of things with physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, and I just kept putting in the work and the time. That was something I actually got yelled at early on, that I was doing too much, which of course is, if you know me and you've been around me, you know that is something that people say I'm a lot, or I do things too much or too intense or blah, blah, blah. But, not everybody is a stroke survivor at 37 with 3 kids and a wife, and managing that in the household and all the things that came with my stroke. But another big thing, which I was thinking about right before we hopped on this episode and this live stream and recording of the podcast, is that I have a well, actually, let me so before I get into that, so I started doing all the therapies. I spent extra time in therapies, as much time as they would allow me to do them. But I returned home in January 2020. Was home for about a week. Wound up waking up the morning after the Super Bowl. I believe it was 2020 when Tom Brady, I think it was that year, yeah, Tom Brady and the Bucks won the Super Bowl. Woke up the next morning talking funny. Was feeling a little weird, but not too weird, but enough so to go back to the hospital and just get checked out. And turns out that was the path to eventually getting diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, MS for short, thank God, because that is a mouthful to say even 4 years in. But yeah, got diagnosed with MS, wound up going back to physical therapy at the same facility I had spent January in, to spend half of February and half March of 2020 for kind of more therapy, but it was for, this time, the left side, which was super fun, as you might imagine, because I was paralyzed from the stroke on my right side of my body. Mind you, I am right-handed, predominantly, right foot, right hand. Yeah, they're not the same. So that side was my dominant side. That was wiped out by stroke. Then the left side, so I was a big ball of basically uselessness for quite a while. Thank goodness that MS is only kind of temporary when this happens, depending on your kind of flare up and your, the type of MS you have. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't nothing, but it wasn't long term. It was able to be kind of, I think, I wouldn't say it was great when I got out on the left side, but it was definitely better than when I went in. So yeah, it took me about, to be honest, I can't really remember at this point, but it definitely took a good 6 months before things were at all kind of okay. Which is odd, because I went back to work in April of 2020. But yeah, I got home right at COVID. I think the day after St. Patrick's Day in 2020. So it was right around the time that the world really shut down there. But yeah, not easy. Definitely not easy. I was looking back at some other photos of my sons when they were younger. Welcome home, Dad. Yeah, it was basically pretty useless for the beginning. Honestly, I'm not really thankful for COVID, but in a weird way, I guess I was just lucky with that timing to some degree because it just allowed me to get home, settled in, back to work, ridiculously quickly. Probably shouldn't have. In hindsight, I talked about that on the episode where we specifically talked about going to work after stroke or significant life event. But yeah, there was that, and then you know, just getting to work. It's really there've been a lot of challenges, a lot of unexpected setbacks. I mean, it really took me a while. Oh, I know. Sorry, before I all over the place, even though I didn't outline for this episode. Yeah, I mean, setbacks are always a thing, so there's no wrong time to talk about setbacks. But I think I was thinking about it before this episode. One of the biggest motivators for me coming out of the kind of the all that first quarter of 2020 in the inpatient rehab was I was so glad to be home. Because inpatient rehab is really great, but it's also very isolating. You're with others, but you spend a lot of time on your own in your room, thinking, reading, like just like kind of with your own thoughts. You're like, what's going on? My family was around. Thankfully, it was pre-COVID, but my wife was managing the house with the kids. They were in school. My daughter was going to her first prom. Like, there's just a lot of things going on that I was missing, and it was just kind of I laugh sometimes because I make fun of it because it's like, oh, it was a nice break, but honestly, I really didn't love it. But I just knew I needed it to get better, at least to get to the point of better that I could be home safely. I think is really the important part of inpatient rehab. Is not that you're going to be immediately better after it. It's just that you can go home, be with your family. It's going to be a long road of recovery. A lot of outpatient. I mean, I still go to outpatient rehab every year just to keep getting better and keep improving. Um, but yeah, the big one for me was that being in that wheelchair is really enlightening and eye opening. People really. I think it was. I always blame it on the fact that I'm 6'8". But yeah, all that time I spent in the wheelchair in 2020, that just motivated the hell out of me to get out of that wheelchair and get back to walking and use the walker and use the cane and use any and every opportunity I could to practice walking, safely, of course. But I did not like being in that wheelchair. And I was thinking about it tonight because I actually got a power wheelchair covered by insurance because of the stroke, because of the MS, because of the size I was at the time. And now it just like sits in my house and takes up space, which I'm very grateful for that it takes up space and that I still have it in case I need it. But I really kind of don't want it. And I really hope to never go back to it is really the big thing there is that, so part of me wants to give it away and, to somebody that might be able to use it and utilize it. But on the other hand, part of me wants to maybe keep it just in case, but it's also like, I never want to find myself. I'm going to keep doing the work for as long as I can until the day I die because I don't want to go back in that wheelchair at all. And that is actually a much bigger motivator than I think I realized even like literally before getting on this recording tonight. It's just it's not fun. People do not treat you kindly. And the world is not a wheelchair friendly place. Even today, even in Florida, where things are more spread out, there's more space. It's just it's not ideal. I'm sure I could learn to live with it. I'm sure I would figure it out. But again, it's not my preference. I don't think it would be anybody's preference. Although it is a power wheelchair, so I don't actually have to do anything. But to not be in it is I'm very grateful and thankful to not be in it with any sort of regularity, except for when I have to move it in the downstairs space that it sits. But yeah, there's so many motivators, so many setbacks, so many challenges, so many things that I've learned over the last 4 years, and I think I wouldn't do anything differently necessarily, but I think there are things that I've learned along the way. I've been a lot more open and honest with myself about certain things. I will say a lot of things that I thought I would never do or never took seriously or thought were stupid, thought wouldn't work for me, etc., etc. Those are the things that wound up working for me. Those are the things that I've sort of was really hesitant about. I'm excited because I found some other things. Yeah, I'm going to start doing some yoga with my daughter because she wants to do hot yoga, and I think that's going to help with some things that the a stroke is a brain injury and it's neurological, and there are lots of things that are not obvious to you or even me when I'm on camera. When you see me in person, like, you don't see a lot of things that might be going on, and I often don't even recognize things. What's a good example? Just sometimes when I move too quickly, I'm a big guy, but I always had great dexterity, great kind of balance for a big man, very agile, again, for a big man, but I'm not the same as I used to be. And that sometimes sneaks up on me, whether that be the gym, whether that be running and, I wouldn't say tripping because I really haven't tripped when I'm running, but you ever run on the sidewalk and there's like a little bump or like one of the pavement pieces is like, you catch your toe onto or something. And I guess it is tripping, but, yeah, I thankfully have not fallen, but I've definitely kind of stumbled and caught myself. But in the past, you wouldn't even notice that, but now I kind of notice it. Or like, yeah, even running in general is something. Yeah, I know people hate me talking about running, but I'm not going to stop talking about running because running is one of those things that changed my life. And I the fact that I never did it before my stroke is just a testament to how, well, one, you could be dead ass wrong about running after stroke. You could also be dead ass wrong about maybe running isn't so bad if you kind of figure out how to like running. That's that's a big one for me. But yeah, with those kind of things, it's like, I look back and I really owe a lot to, well, one, my family, but just having that curiosity that I mean, I'm definitely one of those people that has an insatiable curiosity. I want to figure out how to get better. I wanted to figure out what's going to work for me, and I think that relentless pursuit of that has really paid dividends. A lot of times, you'll hear different people say different things. Whether you're an entrepreneur or a creator, it's like focus on one thing, focus on this thing, focus on that thing. I will tell you, having a very diverse skill set and background, just a wide variety of interests of things around the world, things in my life, hobbies, it's really all played a part in having a pretty successful recovery to date in the past 4 years. It's allowed me to stay open. That's another big thing that I learned along the way is stay open when things aren't working. Be open to other thoughts, other, maybe, it's something that worked for somebody else that you don't think will work for you. That winds up being the thing that works. Breath work, great example. I just hate breath work. The name of it, it just sounds like hocus pocus. Like, oh, of course I'm breathing. I'm alive. Like, yeah, all right, that's true. But also you can breathe better, as it turns out. Fix the breathing was a real big eye opener. But also in conjunction with better breathing, I think not necessarily connecting all the dots from the big picture, but like, so I'll give you an example. I started lifting weights in 2021. I got back into the gym. I felt comfortable enough. There were enough people not going in there, and COVID was really not over, but like the first round of vaccines were out, and like I was very cognizant of people coughing and being near me, but like it was pretty good. The gym was pretty quiet for most of 2021. I felt pretty safe there. I felt comfortable working out, which was good because I'll be honest, I was kind of nervous about it because I had the stroke because of my MS. I just wasn't really a big fan of being around people. And I don't think, of course, living in Florida and going to the gym. Well, one, I didn't want to wear a mask in the gym. I don't think anybody wants to wear a mask in the gym. So that was something that I was being mindful of, just because I'd already been a year and change at that point into my recovery, and I didn't want to do anything to derail my recovery, and I definitely didn't want to. I'm one to push the limits, but I did not want to push the limits on COVID, and I did not want to get it. So I was very, smart, I think, about how I handled that and how I approached my time at the gym. I did have some home gym exercise equipment, so kind of meandering between the two, back and forth. If for some reason the gym got too crowded, I would just peace out and go work out at home. No big deal. I still do that, and now we're obviously at the end of 2023. But yeah, just staying open, and again, what am I trying to say here? I think, yeah. Sorry, I'm just having a brain fart. This is one of the fun things about being a stroke survivor. Sometimes you just have a brain fart. You have all your thoughts laid out, and you just forget your train of thought, which I talked about with Marco on the episode that'll be released later this week. So many. Oh, I know. Working out. So yeah, I was working out. I was lifting weights. Started riding the bike, doing a lot of stair climber. Was not running, but the bike was pretty good. I was walking a bit, but it was like, and I said this before on the running episode specifically, like running and my gait and fixing my gait has been something I still work on. Walking is just like, it's been this challenge. It's the thing I wanted to do the most, but it still doesn't feel quite right, and I'm working on it. So that kind of, biking built up my stamina cardio wise. The stair climber definitely helped build up my cardio and endurance. I got into different kinds of weightlifting, sometimes kind of a mismatch, but or a mismatch. But all the cardio, all the working out, all the exercise up until 2022, and then in conjunction with fixing my breathing, really, I was just like, let's see what we could do with running. And I just kind of, obviously now over 5,000 miles, almost over 5,500 for the year. Really taken a liking to it. I enjoy it. It helps in a lot of ways. And I think it wasn't the most obvious path to running, I think, is where I was going with all this, is that like the breathing, the doing what you can at the time you can do it is important. And don't worry necessarily. I mean, obviously you want to do things you enjoy, but no path, like even if you followed my exact path, even if you went and started lifting weights, and you started stair climber, then you started elliptical, and then you started the bike, and then you started running, and then you started walking, you just keep doing things that are working for you, that make you feel good, that help you, whether it's cognitively, it's emotionally, it's health wise. There were so many things about running that like have really wound up being kind of beneficial, and it's not an obvious path to get to running, especially hating running my whole life, playing sports my whole life, hated the running part of sports, which is kind of an important part of sports. But that, in conjunction with fixing my breathing, it really has changed my life for the better, I think. And that is why this past year has been such a big, not only eye opener, but a big year in terms of growth of my recovery. And just like every morning I wake up feeling good. And I've been feeling pretty good for the last couple of years since my stroke, thanks to the sleep apnea machine. And honestly, I'm down weight. I don't even think I need the machine anymore, but I'm also not going to chance it. So there's that. But because sleep apnea can be a contributing factor to stroke, along with smoking, drinking, poor health choices. There are a number of factors, and I'm pretty sure I was participating in all the poor factor choices. So if you learn one thing from me along the way is d- d- don't do anything I've done, and you should be fine. um, but also, if you find yourself in that spot, there may be things that I could share that have been helpful and that might help you. I don't think everybody who's a stroke survivor needs to fix their breathing, but I said this again. I just, it's not I would change it, but I do wish I found breathing sooner, because I think that might have helped. That obviously would have helped tremendously being in the wheelchair that first year. But hindsight's 2020. So I think that's the importance of sharing things too. For me, is that like I just kind of, even with trial and error, I think everybody, every survivor and every person needs to go through things and do things trial and error. But again, it's finding the things to trial and error sooner than later is kind of the helpful goal, at least for me, in sharing things. Because again, you find yourself, at the time I found nasal breathing last year, 16 months ago, nobody was talking about nasal breathing. Nobody once mentioned it to me. Not a single doctor, not a single therapist, not a physical therapist, not an occupational therapist, not a speech therapist. There are people who I've talked to who like to pretend they've talked about breathing, but I assure you they have not talked about nasal breathing in particular. They did not talk enough about breathing to get me to fix it or change my mind or get me to read a book. Again, I will talk about this book till the day I die. James Nestor, Breath, is a fantastic book. I don't care if you think you're a good breather or not a good breather. Highly recommend reading it. Get it from your local library. If you can't afford it, please. Just if you're struggling, if you find yourself in a wheelchair, if you find yourself just not breathing as great as you can, obviously see a doctor, because there might be something more significant. But also, you might just be breathing incorrectly. A lot of us do. And it feels every time I say I used to be a mouth breather and I'm still a little bit of a mouth breather, people laugh. And I'm like, you can laugh and you could shrug it off, or you could check out that book. Or maybe I'm not wrong, because maybe, there aren't a lot of 6'8", 300 pound. Well, I'm definitely under 300 pounds now, but I'm still saying 325 for the record. Yeah, there's not a lot of big guys like me running 5,500 miles a year. There's not a lot of healthy people running 5,500 miles a year. That's a lot of miles. I don't want to pat myself on the back, but I do want to assure you, if you are a survivor, or somebody who's a survivor who might be struggling, or they want to get back to certain things and they can't. I said this in our post last week. There's no faking the hard work. I've tried, believe me. I've tried all the shortcuts. I was hoping for the magic pill. I was hoping for the magic surgery. I was hoping somebody would give me something that would do all the work for me after my stroke and getting diagnosed with MS. Turns out the only way to do this is through actual hard work. Maybe you don't have to work as hard as I have, because you hopefully were not 500 pounds and a quarter ton and looked like a baby walrus or a baby sea lion. And, some people have different setbacks and different circumstances and different opportunities, or even potentially less opportunities. But yeah, there's no mistake in it. It's a grind. It's hard work. It is a lot. It is not for the faint of heart. If you find yourself in this situation, I hope I can help you out of it. Ideally, you don't find yourself in this situation. Please, if you've been around somebody who's been a heart attack or had a heart attack or a stroke or any significant life event that you kind of hopefully prevent, because again, heart and stroke are preventable if you know what you're preventing it from, or you see the signs and you start to see them earlier, sooner than later. Because believe me, changing things before it's too late would be my preference looking back. I think every survivor would probably agree with me on that. It is not easy. It is not easy. I'm sure most people will not listen, but it is not easy. You don't want to find yourself in that spot. It has been eye-opening to say the least. I try to see the silver lining in everything. I think for me, it's clear that I was probably not going to stop drinking and smoking until it happened to me. Again, tough pill to swallow, hard lesson learned. Well done on my end, but there are benefits to it. I've gotten the second chance life that Crispy and I talked about on the last episode. And again, something I've talked about many, many times. Just, it's, I'm trying to make the most of it. I'm trying to do the best I can. I enjoy doing this podcast. I enjoy sharing things that I learned throughout the year, throughout the weeks. Some weeks it's a little slower and I have to dig deep and find something deep within myself to share. I still have lots to share, lots to learn myself. And it's, to me, that's good because I know if I keep doing this podcast, and whether it's live streaming, whether it's YouTube, whether it's just audio podcasting, some combination thereof. I mean, I'm way behind on YouTube videos, but that's going to change in 2024. And there's a lot of new goals that I have for 2024 that are, ambitious to say the least. But I look back at how far I've come in 4 years, and I know for any survivor out there, just how difficult it is. I think that's why it's so important to me to start that survivor science blog and get resources to people in people's hands, because I just know when I was going through it, and I was going through it in early 2020 was the time I was really starting to dig into things. By the time I realized what had happened, kind of not that long ago, only, well, I guess 4 years ago now, but it wasn't like we were living in 2004 and 2020. It was 16 years later. I mean, there were limited resources and still limited resources. I mean, there are not a lot of stroke survivors who are parents who are able to share unique things. There are not a lot of people like me, period. But yeah, I mean, unfortunately, the stroke survivors are getting younger. Heart attack survivors are getting younger. I mean, you saw Crispin and I last week, on that episode. I at the time was 37. He was right around 47. I think he was 46 at the time of his heart attack. We're now moving on to the next phase, our 40s and 50s. But yeah, you think you're invincible even in your 30s and 40s, and life has a funny way of showing us that's not true necessarily. So, I mean, I do care if you want to make a change, but if you don't, more power to you. I hope you don't find yourself on the wrong side of that. I just think there's so many other things I could think to talk about today. But again, I do kind of want to keep it around an hour, so I'll go a few more minutes. Breathing has been probably honestly, I think it's been the most impactful change to me. Again, because it led to running, and again, that sounds obvious to somebody that's 120 pounds and 5'2", who might enjoy running already. But if you're bigger and you're going through it and you hate running, but I think it's it's a really great lesson, I think, in doing things that you don't think will, one, you want to do, two, you may not think or see the benefits initially, but if you look into it a little more, in the running, I guess for me, like, it wasn't to lose weight. It wasn't it was really just to see if I could enjoy it for the first time in my life. I mean, I did want to see if I could do it, period. But after that, and kind of getting into it, when I don't run now, I actually don't. My body it's a weird day. I can handle not running, but I don't really like not handling running. And so I think it helps with the MS. I think it has a lot of good upsides for me. And I don't have to do marathons every day. I mean, I haven't really in the month of December. I'm still running an insane amount for a normal. But yeah, I'm down to about 20 miles a day, which is, normal for me. And I don't know if that's going to continue in 2024. I think I'm going to kind of go down even a little more in mileage, but I'm going to run every day. I like running twice a day. It works for me. I have this weird fascination with trying to be the world's strongest man in 2024. I mean, obviously a little ambitious. It's hard to get to be the world's strongest man in just a year. Although I do think it helps being around 300 pounds, 6'8" to start. Um, but yeah, going to incorporate a lot more weightlifting. Have already been doing that. I can't move my shoulders as we speak. Even tapping the microphone and pulling it down is a struggle today. But I'm trying to get some of that really hit the ground running in 2024. So I'm trying to get some of those back into heavier weights, and I'm really pushing myself to kind of get all that soreness out that happens when you only lift on and off and you're not lifting super heavy. So that's fun. I should be nice and uncomfortable for the next week and a half as we get into 2024. But yeah, I'm saying things that work for me may not work for you, and I think it's just about staying open and honest with yourself. I will say one of the benefits too, along with no longer drinking and smoking, for me, obviously that changes my health significantly. Listening to doctors, taking the medications that I'm supposed to. Crispy and I talked about this, really presenting information to my doctors and saying, hey, this is wrong, this is right, this is feeling good, this isn't feeling good. What do you got for me? I think that's something that I would encourage all survivors to do looking back, and I continue to do that. Pushing yourself within reasonable limits, and being honest with that. Like, are you not pushing yourself because you genuinely can't, such as you're still, slightly paralyzed, or it's beyond your capabilities of safety, things to keep in mind. Are you really tracking? Are you eating well? Do you feel good when you're eating? Or if you're not feeling so good or not doing a great job there, maybe track it. Maybe just revisit those things. For me, that was important. That's, again, running to lose weight was not the goal. It's just been the benefit of running all that time over the last year. And I'm down to half. Oh, well, no, I'm not down to 250. That's ridiculous. But I am half the size. I'm only half of a baby walrus now, so that's nice. That's a good feature. About 220-ish, depending on the day and the scale. But yeah, I'm actually down to 275. I don't even like that. We'll see. I might go to 265. We'll see. I feel like I need to stay over 250 though. But that'll be good to see if that continue. I mean, obviously that's going to continue. I'm not going to let that slide. I think that's been another big thing, is really keeping myself accountable this year and continuing to do that over the last 4 years. It's hard. It's not easy. It's the second time in my life that I've lost an entire person off my body. When I was in college, I lost 160 pounds during my freshman year, or my freshman year going into my sophomore year. And then I gained that all back before my stroke. So this is now the second time I've lost a literal human being off the side of my body. So I know it's difficult. It's hard to maintain. I do think I'm older, wiser, and now have been scared straight. Obviously, my own doing to some degree, within reason. But yeah, I now know that's not going to happen again. I will not let myself slide. Fool me once, I don't know what the saying is, but yeah. Anyways, second time around, I got it. We're not going back there. So yeah, I think that's kind of about it. I mean, I think there's tons of things I could be sharing on this episode, but I really just think, looking back, lots of things I've learned. I've learned to be kinder to myself. I've learned to this is kind of a tough one. It's a weird way to end, but I've had to learn how to ask for help, and I've had to learn how to lower my expectations of what that means to some degree. Again, I've talked about this on previous episodes, but like with family and friends and people in my life, really being helpful and supportive has been amazing. And asking for help is really difficult for me in general. And the reason is because, like, I'm used to doing things 100 miles an hour. That no longer happens, especially when I ask for help. And I think just having the ability to get help, I'm grateful for. Not always at the speed at which I would like, but through that process, I finally understood how to kind of slow down a little bit and really appreciate life. And I really do find a lot more joy in life. I try to really find that silver lining. I try to spend more time with my immediate family, not my extended family, but my immediate family. I love spending time with the kids. I cherish it. I work hard for them. They're really the reason, besides for myself, but outside of myself, the reason I do all of this is because like my boys are 9 and 10 now. My daughter is 21. And I got to tell you, at 40 years old, I see people give me a weird look. I still get that fire in my belly and I get fired up and I'm like, somebody cuts me off. Nope. But that helps to some degree. It's helped me get back. That's why I do the running. That's why I do the lifting. That's why I'm always in the gym. That's why I really want to get back to a coach sort of not even just okay fitness level, just like I'm not even kidding about world's strongest man. I mean, maybe I'm kidding about that part, but yeah, like benching 225 and making sure that I can, as my boys go into high school, they're only in elementary school, but as they go into the next phase of their life in middle school and high school, I'm not messing around. Like I'm quite aware that they're going to be big, especially my youngest one. He's a real pain in my ass. He's clearly he's all me. And he is projected to be 6'6". Do you think I want another 6-foot person in this house? I mean, we already got one with my daughter at age 21, but I do not want a 6'6" kid in my house. So I'm dad is going to continue working out and striving to be the best he can and getting back to business because it's just, I don't want anybody taking, well, I'm getting off the rails there, but, there are motivations that are not necessarily the best motivation, but there's a lot of motivation to stay fit, to continue this journey, to keep working hard, to keep sharing the journey. Because again, you can't find a lot of these things online. They're just, as a younger survivor of stroke and Chris being a younger survivor of a heart attack, like the two of us alone, like, I mean, there's just not those resources. And what works for us may not work for you, but let us, if we could share it and help it helps you in some way, or you're just trying a thing and you're like, oh, this is weird, nobody's mentioned this. It's probably a thing. You should probably listen. You should explore that thing in your head that's telling you, yeah, maybe I should look into this more, because that's part of it. And certainly would have been easier to have a little bit of a head start in some of these cases, and again, expedite the trial and error. So yeah, we're getting to the end of this episode. I've rambled on quite a bit in this live stream, which we'll see how this goes. But in every week at the end of the podcast, I talk about what I'm watching, what I'm reading, what I'm listening to, what I'm enjoying. And I am not prepared as usual, but I will tell you, this is my favorite time of year because everybody wants to go on vacation, but I don't want to leave the house. So I have been enjoying Anthony Bourdain's on HBO Max. Anthony Bourdain, for those that don't know, he was a host of Travel Channel for a long time. He is no longer with us, unfortunately, tragically. But he was a great explorer. I love his shows. I kind of I love his New York attitude and vibe. Anthony Bourdain is if you don't know him, check him out. But on HBO is Parts Unknown, which is, I think, his. So he had the old one on Travel Channel, which was called something, and then the HBO Max one that was on CNN before HBO Max, I guess, leased it probably to stream. It's a great show. Lots of cool places. I think what I appreciate so much about Anthony Bourdain, and always have since I've known about him, is just his appreciation for life, culture, just understanding different points of view, different people around the world. It's just such a fascinating show, and honestly, it's a great way to travel without leaving your house. Highly recommend. 10 out of 10. Would do it again. Watch it on repeat. Sadly, I think he tragically passed towards the end of that series. So I'm kind of keeping the last couple seasons of that. Like, I usually burn through things, but like I'm just savoring these last couple. I have a couple more seasons of the one on HBO Max, which I'm saving for. I don't know what the hell I'm saving it for. Probably just this week. But he's so, yeah. If you ever seen him, it's a really good watch. It's a really, I got to be honest. I love traveling. I've talked about that a little bit on this podcast, and I was talking about it with Chris right before we hopped on about my time. And I spent 2005 studying abroad in Italy. Lived in Rome for most of the year. Traveled a lot between Rome, Florence, Venice, the Amalfi Coast, Naples in particular, Pompeii, because I did a major project down there for architecture school. Wound up traveling. I've spent a lot of time in Europe throughout high school and college. I spent a lot of time in Spain, France, mostly Western Europe, but also Great Britain, Ireland, all over. I know that sounds really obnoxious, but I've had opportunities to travel, and as much as I love traveling, I do not love it as much anymore. But I also have 3 kids, so that makes it difficult. So watching Anthony Bourdain travel for me is just great because we have very similar, well, definitely not a similar look, but a similar mentality and appreciation, I think, for things. So that makes it a good watch for me. I guess I'm all about living in the past this year because the book I am reading, let me see, it's on Audible. I'm just trying to get the correct name. I am I am between military books, which I love military stories, because I myself was going to join the army in 2010, right as I met my wife, which I think I've said on the show as well. I went to MEPS. I went all the way through MEPS. They decided that I was 3 pounds overweight, so they were going to send me. They sent me back, and they're like, "All right, come back in a month. If you weigh correct, on target for your height and weight at the time," which I was pretty fit back then. It was surprising that they measured me a little short, I think. Anyways, during that month that I was supposed to go back, I met my wife and I told myself, all right, we'll see where this goes. And if it goes somewhere, I won't join. And it was going somewhere. So I held off, and then I wound up marrying my wife and never returned to join the army. Which, I guess worked out for the best in some ways, and some ways maybe not. So I have fascination with that. I have friends that has served overseas in the military and our country, and it's just something, it's something that I definitely would have pursued, but I also felt like I had met the love of my life, and I didn't want to just push that aside, especially because I met my wife. I also met my daughter, and then I wound up adopting my daughter. So yeah, it all worked out for the best. But yeah, the book I'm mainly reading right now is Hotel Scarface, which is about the Mutiny Hotel and my favorite era, the 80s cocaine Miami times. I like to live vicariously through the books and kind of remember. I love stories about Miami. Obviously, being a Miami graduate, spent a lot of time in Coral Gables, Miami, Brickell. A lot of my life, that's where I met my wife, is in Miami when I was living down there and she was living down there. Yeah, I don't know. I have some weird fascination with the 80s and 90s cocaine era and the bad boys of Miami and just that whole thing. Again, it's not the life I live anymore, but it's always fascinates me to no end. It's just, this has nothing to do with the podcast or being a stroke survivor. It's just what I'm watching, what I'm listening to, what I'm enjoying. I do want to say one thing, though. I think it's very strange that well, maybe I shouldn't say it, but it's interesting who can work for the government and who can't. When it comes to certain things, you can't have certain histories. And I just think those are the people that you might want to have hired sometimes when it comes to certain things. Yeah, it's interesting. Because once upon a time, I looked into jobs for the federal government and the FBI and the CIA, and apparently you can't do certain things, or you couldn't back then, And I just think, isn't that the people that you want? The smart people, like, kind of sniff things out. Catch my drift? Yeah, I don't know. I just think that's really funny to me because I think those would be the people that would best help find problems quickly. Anyways, that's enough of this live stream. That's enough of episode whatever this is going to be. We're somewhere in the 40s. There's a lot. I have a lot of things in the tank, so I don't know how things are releasing, but yeah, definitely this week we'll be recording or not recording. We'll be finalizing the episode with Margot. I think that's going to be a great episode right before Christmas. Really, a stroke survivor talking to another stroke survivor. I think is going to be really beneficial and something I hope to do more of in 2024. As always, you can find me at Think Lovable on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. Nope, not YouTube. You can find me on YouTube. You can also find me on LinkedIn under my actual name. What else? I think that's it for social media. Yeah. Anyways, everything will be in the show notes. I'll recap everything. I know this wasn't the greatest episode, but hey, I'm a stroke survivor before Christmas with 3 kids. You can imagine how this is going this week. So hopefully stay safe. Enjoy the holidays. Hopefully you're not shopping last minute because it is a nightmare out there, at least here in Florida, but that's every Tuesday in Florida. So yeah, we'll leave it there and hope you have a great holiday season and bye.